on this edition of Southern Newsweek. A bus driver calls time on a 40-year career behind the wheel. 187 jobs are being promised in an ambitious project. And a new organisation visits a Dunedin construction site to encourage workers to express themselves. Kia ora, I'm Melissa Barton. The daily school run can be a mission for some parents, with kids fighting in the car, morning traffic and other pressures. But imagine driving 30 children to and from school for 40 years.
The wheels on the bus have stopped going round and round for Val Fox after driving South Otago kids to school for 40 years. She says many years ago the bus broke down and they had to resort to a not strictly kosher way of getting the kids to school.
I got my husband to come up in the old ute, and we could do that in those days because it was just the way it was. There weren't so many rules as there are now. And then, so all the kids jumped on the back and drove them down to the school, yahooing and carrying on the back of the ute, and loved it.
She says stern words and the odd bit of animal control are all essential talents when your daily school run involves 30 children in the country's agricultural heartland.
I stopped at a family, it was the Perkinses then, and they had about 5 children. So I was sitting there waiting for them all to get on, and then I turned around and said, "You right?" And the goat walked in the bus. So that was hilarious. All the kids just laughed, and it was great. We had a bit of trouble getting it out though.
About 30 years ago, Waitahuna West sheep farmer David Alderton was one of the kids Val Fox took to school, and he says he always felt safe as he knew Mrs Fox was looking out for them in more ways than one.
Yeah, she had to keep the odd eye on us. I used to see the odd look in the mirror when we were sitting in the bus.
He's since had his own brood picked up and delivered safely for the past few years and applauds Fox's dedication to the area. Val Fox stepped down after 40 years of service to Waitahuna and Lawrence schools at the end of last term and says she won't necessarily miss the driving, but will miss the children. In South Otago, the South Today.
180 temporary jobs will be created in Southland after the government announced a $25 million upgrade to the Homer Tunnel in Fiordland. The boost has been welcomed by both business and civic leaders.
Regional Economic Development and Infrastructure Minister Shane Jones met with Southlanders to announce a number of government-funded projects, including upgrading the Homer Tunnel, which provides tourists the only road access to Milford Sound.
It'll future-proof an essential part of our infrastructural resilience in this part of New Zealand. And at some point in time, tourism will recover and we'll need that kind of infrastructure so people can move around to Waipounamu in an efficient and safe manner.
Jones says the work will create 180 temporary jobs and bring much-needed safety improvements to the tunnel.
Various personnel in NZTA strenuously advised us that this was a major infrastructure shovel-ready project that would have substantial safety outcomes.
So far, no one has been injured when vehicles have caught fire in the tunnel, but the risk of a serious accident in the tunnel is a real one, which the improvements will help mitigate.
Yes, so there was a lot of fear that if there was an awful accident and people were trapped in the tunnel, there's an overdue need to create space to enable people to survive or to ensure that the frontline service men and women could get in there, God forbid, in the case of an awful accident.
Some of the work on the Homer Tunnel is set to begin immediately, with the rest set to be progressed over the next 18 months. In Invercargill, the South Today.
A new organisation is on a mission to encourage people working in the construction industry to talk about mental health. Representatives from Auckland-based company Mates in Construction visited workers at the site of Dunedin's hospital build, and a warning, this story does deal with the topic of suicide.
A group featuring construction workers who've gone through their own mental health struggles are banding together to grow a supportive network of peers looking out for each other.
Most of the time that we had the responses were, where have you guys been for so long, just for the construction industry, just to get that kind of support that they need.
Slade McFarlane says they received a great welcome from workers at the Dunedin Hospital construction site. He says in an ideal world, men would openly talk about their feelings, which could have helped him when he was younger.
Yeah, I contemplated suicide when I was, in my late 30s, but I needed help, and I think my GP actually offered me tablets, but I didn't want tablets. I actually wanted just someone to talk to. So 2.5 years of therapy, and this is where I've come out, and I'm just trying to share the story with with the guys that are out there.
Mates in Construction Field Officer Richie Heppy says as well as speaking with construction workers across the country, part of their role is to select people who can look out for their workmates as well.
They can identify when somebody is struggling. They become more alert on site, when people are, not travelling too good. So they can see these signs, and we call them invitations. And basically just have a conversation with them, see that they're travelling good and how they can support them, what they can do to help.
Heppy spent time as a carpenter and as a youth worker helping rangatahi find purpose. He says the impact of COVID-19 on the construction industry has been devastating, with a lot more sad people around.
Look at the construction industry, you work from stupid o'clock to stupid o'clock, six days a week, maybe 7 even now, got to make up the time type of thing. So that puts a whole lot of different sort of pressures on family, relationships, finances, all that type of thing. So there's some people that are really hurting out there, and that's why we're here. That's why we're here to alleviate some of that pain and to give people some tools to be able to navigate to find places where they can get that support.
The blokes say Mates in Construction's main focus is to reduce stigma about talking about mental health, to provide on-site leadership, and to build a stronger and resilient workforce. If you work in the industry and need help, their number is on the screen. In Dunedin, the South Today.
A long-serving Wanaka aircraft engineer is calling time on his career. Ralph Fegan says there have been many highlights during the decades of service, but says involvement with NASA was among his top flight experiences.
Ralph Fegan is wrapping up after more than 10 years in his management roles at Wanaka's airport. Over that time, he's seen the country's tourism boom grow the little rural airport from about 30 workers in 2007 to over 300 earlier this year.
So the engineering businesses have expanded. It moved over from Queenstown, set up. There's a tremendous amount of helicopter engineering done here for the lower part of the South Island. A lot of fixed wing as well, smaller fixed wing. So there's a lot of people employed there. I think Skydive probably had they would have been getting up towards 100 pre-COVID. By the time everybody has days off and various shifts, they were going flat out, and seen a lot of growth.
Fegan's confident projects such as the launching of NASA balloons, which are used to study the Earth's upper atmosphere, will continue.
They've just leased an adjacent hangar here for the next 3 years to work out on. It's quite likely they're going to spend a lot of money upgrading that hangar to these specifications and look at even possibly building onto it. So they've got a wonderful future here. They're wonderful people to work with, and it's been a wonderful thing for Wanaka. One of only 7 sites in the world where this is done.
It's been 7 years since Air New Zealand offered daily flights from Wanaka, and he's hopeful that proposed Sounds Air flights to Christchurch will be a success.
It was a very expensive aircraft to operate, they do admit. It was at the wrong time of the day for most people. Taking off out of here at lunchtime, you get to Christchurch and you couldn't really get anywhere else unless you weren't in a hurry to go somewhere. So hopefully our new Sounds Air service is going to rectify a lot of that, and reality is they should have been here 2 years ago when they wanted to come, but politically that hasn't happened. Hopefully it will very, very soon.
Fegan says the proposed expansion of Wanaka's airport will be many years away, and by the time it does happen, many aircraft could well be silent, thanks to electric motors.
That's the way of the future. And they'll come and go, and nobody will even know, unless they look in the sky and see them. And that'll be wonderful for Wanaka.
Ralph Fegan's last day at the airport is Tuesday this week. In Wanaka, the South Today.
Still to come on Southern Newsweek, warehouse staff were called into meetings nationwide to hear who will still have jobs. And a Good Samaritan comes to the rescue of a Dunedin businesswoman, so see you after the break. Welcome back. 900 workers are set to lose their jobs at Warehouse Group stores across the country. The company closed stores nationwide as staff were given the news.
Under a proposal released this morning, Dunedin's Central City Warehouse store is to close to the public, becoming an online fulfilment centre, thus holding the store's presence in the Central City as a distribution centre for online shoppers, keeping the site out of rival Kmart's hands. The Warehouse Group has also announced it's begun a consultation process to change the working hours of staff across its 92 stores. First Union claims the company told those gathered at meetings this morning the Warehouse Group plans to eliminate 782 roles and an additional 137 jobs as stores close. The company hasn't said anything about the futures of 42 staff currently employed at the Dunedin Central Warehouse, nor when the transition will take place. The warehouse hasn't yet released details about staffing levels at the South Dunedin store. In Dunedin, the South Today.
Members from the Dunedin Model Aero Club are using the Edgar Centre to try out their aircraft. Club members say the large indoor space is ideal for flying smaller wind-up and battery-powered planes.
Each Wednesday morning, a group of model plane enthusiasts meet up at Dunedin's Edgar Centre to fly their delicate aircraft in the safety of an indoor venue.
The planes, of course, are very small and really would be tossed about by the wind. And so these are a type of plane that can really only be flown inside.
The group are all part of the Dunedin Model Aero Club, of which some members fly more powerful petrol-powered aircraft on the Taieri floodplain. The ones being flown at the Edgar Centre are either bought off the shelf or built from plans and hobby magazines.
We have really only rubber bands and the electric for the radio-controlled planes, and one or two free-flight planes as well will fly on little electric motors with very small lithium batteries.
Thompson is a fan of aircraft made from balsa and tissue paper and powered by a wind-up rubber band, where the objective is to stay airborne as long as possible.
And it's a very, very easy contest to run. It's simply a duration contest. But for all the others, of course, they're flown just for fun. And most of the time the skill is in simply finding you can fly it safely without breaking it.
The model plane enthusiasts are charged $5 each for their 2-hour slot at the Edgar Centre. In Dunedin, the South Today.
A Good Samaritan has come to the rescue of a Dunedin businesswoman after a car crashed into her St Kilda home. Being unable to continue her business from home, she's now been given a free office space in Dunedin's iconic Barton's building.
Dunedin businesswoman Chesa Musiewski is settled into her new office in the Barton's building after her home office in South Dunedin's Victoria Road was smashed into by an SUV back in May this year.
And the house is badly damaged. Half of the house is unoccupiable still. And unfortunately, this our working space was exactly at the impact point.
Upon learning of the damage to her office, business associate Chris Willis has given her some recently vacated office space in his building to use in the interim, and for free.
Well, we thought it would be a little churlish to charge for it, given that their own office had been damaged by the car. We just thought it would be just a random act of kindness, I guess, to say, look, why don't you come and set yourself up here, at least until your own home is back in action. And that seemed like a reasonable thing when we had the space available and empty anyway.
Musiewski is in the process of resurrecting the former electricity company, Payless Energy Limited, and says she loves the positive spirit she's found in her 36 years living in Dunedin.
I believe in Dunedin. I believe that we will come up even stronger after all those difficult times.
Now providing office space for various companies, the Bartons building was once a butchery, well known for its animated farm animals on the exterior. In Dunedin, the South Today.
After the break on Southern Newsweek, a Dunedin swim coach believes the uncertainty of the Olympic Games isn't impacting on his training program, and there's a new game in town for Timaru, so find out more after the break. Thanks for staying with us. Dunedin swim coach Lars Humer says the uncertainty of the Olympic Games isn't affecting his training program. Although questions remain about the Games, Humer says there are several other international competitive events for New Zealand's young swimmers to plan and prepare for.
Dunedin's competitive swimmers are back in the pool, with at least 3 of them planning for next year's Olympics in Tokyo. But their coach Lars Humer says the possibility of next year's big event in Japan isn't on the top of his mind, with plenty of other swimming events to train for.
Hey, we all want to go to the Olympics and we're hoping that it's going to be on, but we also know that if it's not possible, then we've got a lot of other events to prepare for, even locally, like New Zealand champs and things. And even if the Olympics do go ahead, if we don't swim fast at the New Zealand champs next year, then we don't trigger a nomination to go to the Olympics. So we've got parts of the process that we have to get right before there anyway.
Humer, who was also New Zealand's head coach for the Games, says the late cancellation of this year's Olympics in Tokyo with only 4 months to go was unsettling.
When it looked like the Olympics were going to be postponed, but no one was making the call due to a lot of bureaucracy and politics, that was a tough time. I think once the decision was made, whilst disappointing, at least we knew where we were, and I think when you know where you're going, then you can replan and reset, and that's not necessarily comforting, but at least we know where we're going, what we're doing and why.
Dunedin swimmers have been back in the water for 9 weeks, receiving tips from Humer and assistant coach Kurt Crosland, with 3 young women being contenders for the Olympics, where a delay of a year will see them older, more experienced and theoretically better.
And we do have 3 girls that are on the Olympic long list at the moment. So we have Kira Smith, who's from Northland originally, but down here doing university, Caitlin Deans, local girl, and Erica Fairweather, local girl. And we want to build on that in the future as well.
Humer is quick to point out that while the life of swimmers is disciplined with early morning starts, they are not deprived of a normal life.
And whilst they have a different lifestyle and slightly different hours that they keep, they also have the opportunity to be exceptional people in terms of their dedication towards the sport that carries on really well into school, university. And I talk to former swimmers now. We have some parents who were swimmers, maybe not quite back in my day, but head in that direction, who have now their kids in the program and really value some of the discipline and the dedication and the commitment that's required in swimming, and it carries into other walks of life.
Humer is set to become more involved with other swimmers across the country once the squad is selected next year. In Dunedin, the South Today.
Visual journalist Craig Baxter and Otago Daily Times reporter Daisy Hudson travelled through the South recently to gauge attitudes towards the upcoming national election. Tonight we play you the first of 5 instalments of their journey.
Dunedin South Member of Parliament Claire Curran announced her departure from politics, creating a vacancy in the seat held by Labour for its entire history. Following a brief and well-mannered battle last month, broadcaster and lawyer Ingrid Leary was selected.
It's unusual for somebody who hasn't lived here very long to come in and be able to get the trust of local people. So I'm very aware of that. I'm very privileged to have their trust.
Although Leary has only lived in Dunedin since late last year, she studied at the University of Otago and has family ties to the city.
I did my honours degree in law here. My dad's family were from here, from Harrow Street.
Leary is a New Zealand Special Service Medal recipient for her coverage from the Indonesian province of Banda Aceh following the earthquake and tsunami in 2004 and 2005. She says working remotely in tragedy zones with people who are struggling to survive taught her a lot about herself and communication.
Where human beings can come together and try and resolve these issues. So these are things like gender equality, climate change, issues around development. So where people can come together and work on these big problems and appreciate their differences, appreciate their common humanity, and put aside the differences and the judgment. That's the best way that we know how to do cultural relations.
She says an experience with a local guide in Banda Aceh was a valuable lesson about being a working mother.
And I was feeling a little bit sorry for myself that I was missing my daughter's birthday, and he was very compassionate, and then he shared with me that he'd actually lost his 3 children, his wife and his mother-in-law in the tsunami. And he gave me a hug. I mean, it was just unbelievable, and it was a really defining moment for me.
She's also worked for the British Council as a country director. The 2 unsuccessful Labour candidates were Rachel Brooking, a lawyer specialising in local government and environmental law, and Simon McCallum, a senior lecturer in software engineering. National is yet to announce who will stand for the party in the Dunedin South electorate, but MP and former Government Minister Michael Woodhouse is set to run for the Dunedin North seat again. In Dunedin, the South Today.
Timaru's Southern Events Centre is set to become busy with social and competitive players enjoying the new sport of pickleball. Played with a paddle bat and a hollow plastic ball, the game is usually played indoors on badminton courts.
The game of pickleball is taking off across the South Island, with people in Timaru recently being invited to try out the game at the Southern Events Centre. Played on a badminton court with the nets lowered and using a hollow ball, the game particularly suits retirees who want something a bit less energetic than tennis.
A system where you're playing similar to tennis, but you play more at the non-volley zone, which is up by the net, rather than the baseline. So you're trying to get up to that line at the front end, and it becomes like a bit of ping pong.
Pickleball New Zealand Development Officer Joe Tawayo says just up the road in Ashburton, the game of pickleball became very popular in very little time.
There's a really good group in Ashburton that's just started with 3 or 4 people, and there are like 40 or 50 people playing, turning up 3 times a week, so numbers they grow pretty fast.
Tawayo says there are well over 1,000 players across New Zealand, and it's a game anyone can enjoy if they travel across the world.
And what's good about it is you can take your paddle anywhere in the world and just turn up at a paddleboard court. You don't have to be a member, you just pay your $5 and join in.
Last week was the first public pickleball event at the Southern Events Centre. In Timaru, the South Today.
Thanks for watching. That wraps up this edition of Southern Newsweek. For the latest news from the Southern region, head online to odt.co.nz and follow ODT and Channel 39 on social media. Ka kite anō.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.